Welcome to this programming tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to look at library routines. Now, what is a library? Well, a library is like a piece of code saved in another Python file that you can access or load into your own Python file. For example, Python comes with a standard set of library routines that you use every single time you program. These are stuff like prints and inputs or rounds. We've used these extensively. However, what you have to understand is that these all come from a subroutine that someone has created in the Python library for you to use. Otherwise, it'd be a lot more difficult to print out items to the console. So, how is this useful? Well, there's a lot of libraries out there that we can use in Python. If I open the IDLE in Python, this is the standard program that we use to do Python programming, and I go to open, we can actually see over here we've got library or lib, and within that we've got loads of Python files here that are being used or can be used. Let's use, for example, the random library over here. As you can see, this library is just a normal Python file that contains loads and loads of subroutines that someone has created for you to use. For example, we can use rand range to get a range of values. Now, you might be thinking, is that as easy as just writing rand range over here? No, it's not. We need to get that library and we need to import it into our code. In other words, we need to add it into our code, and there are three ways to do this. The first way is a standard way. We just write import and the name of the file. In this case, the name of the file is random. That will grab all the code from that random file we saw before and put it inside your Python code. Now, before we can use rand range, which is a subroutine inside there, and let's print it out, we need to specify the file it comes from. In this case, it's the file random, and then we're going to use dots and look at all of the subroutines we now have access to. And there's rand range. Rand range takes two values in, starting value and an ending value, and it'll give you a random number between those two values. So what we've done here, we've grabbed the subroutine from the random file that we've imported or copied into our code. If I run this, I will always get a random number between 0 and 100. See? Now, I said there's one way of doing it. There are two other ways of doing this as well. If we don't want to have to write the file name like random every single time, we can give it an alias. To give it an alias, we just specify as, and then whatever we want to call it. For example, we can call this R. By doing this, instead of having to write random here, we can just write R. And in that case, we're going to specify random as just R. So instead of using the random file name, we're just using the R file name. Now, I run this program, you see it still works. We still use the random range. Now, the third way of using it is instead of writing import random as R, which copies the entire code into your file, we can make it more memory efficient by just grabbing the subroutine we want to use. In this case, rand range. Now, how do we do that? Well, instead of importing like that, we're going to say from the random file, import the subroutine rand range. Now, the cool thing about doing it this way is A, you're only grabbing one bit of code from that massive file, and B, you don't need to specify the file name anymore. So if I run this, you'll see it still works. I still get a random number, but I haven't specified the file name, and I've only imported what is required. Now, there's hundreds of libraries you can use. There's hundreds of libraries you can download and install that other people have created. You can also create your own libraries. All you have to do is save it in the same location and then import your file. So you can actually section off your file into separate files to organize your code better. It's that easy. But there are some that you should get used to. The random library, for one, is important. Because we can also use, I just switch it back here, we can also use another one called random over here. And that will give us a random value from 0.1 to 1.0. See? There's also other ones we can use, like random choice, or we can use randint, or we can use random shuffle. But I'll leave you to look those up and figure out what they do. Another library that's quite useful is the math library. With the math library, I can use some useful functions, like for example math.sqrt over here, SQRT, which stands for the square root. So for example, I can get the square root of 25 and it returns it as a float. I can also use mathsin, cosine, and tangent to get the relevant numbers from that. I can even specify math.pi to get pi. Now, a lot of these I know off the top of my head, but it took a lot of practice and learning and reading. If you're not sure what to do or what the libraries give you, research the library online and try and figure it out. There's plenty of documentation online to show you all the subroutines that you can use in each library. If you want to create your own library, we can try that here. I'll create a new file over here. We'll call this one helper.py. And let's create a subroutine here that calculates the area. And I'm going to return the length times the width, which I'll pass in as parameters here. Now, this helper file is in the same location as my other file. So I can do import helper, and then I can print helper.calculateArea 5 and 6. There you go. I've now just imported my own code from another file just by importing it. And yes, I can also do from helper import calculate area. I can do it exactly the same. What I'm trying to show you here is that you can do the exact same thing that the Python developers did to create all those libraries for you to use. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful.